Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Hila Oz. Thank you. Hi, I'm Hila Oz. A little bit about me is I come from Los Angeles. I was born to Israeli parents, and Eretz Israel has always been a huge part of my life. I was not always religious, but even when I was an atheist, Eretz Israel was always so important to me, and I always looked so forward to coming here. I realize that the more religious I get, the more of a Zionist I become, and vice versa. And I'm going to be hosting this panel. So I just want to turn it over to our participants. I'm going to let them have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. I'll start with you.
I think they have we have the two involved.
To me. Hello everyone. My name is Anton Goodman. I'm here wearing my hat of a board member of Oz V'Shalom, which is a religious Zionist peace movement in Israel. I also work at the Abraham Initiatives, which is a large Jewish Arab non-profit in Israel advancing shared society, equality, and all kinds of good things like that. I'm pleased to be on the panel. I don't necessarily endorse anything that Inon has just said about Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank, but I am happy to take part in the conversation because I believe that it comes from a place, and I hope that this panel continues in that light. It comes from a place of believing in human dignity and understanding that there's legitimacy to multiple claims on the Holy Land. So I'm happy to be here this evening.
Hello friends, my name is Adiel. Let's start by saying that Jewish identity has always been a big part of my life. I myself do not consider myself religious, but I do come from a religious family, you can say, a very Jewish, proudly Jewish family. For pretty much my entire life, researching Jewish identity, Jewish history, our place in the world has been kind of like a goal for me. And over the past year, I started also getting active on it, mainly on social media. I started with TikTok. I just opened TikTok for fun, like pretty much everyone else, just to watch funny videos and stuff like that. And the amount of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric that I was exposed to kind of like overwhelmed me. And I don't really know how it happened. I just dove into the activism field and started making videos, whether it's about like Jewish identity, Jewish history, Israel, answering and responding to anti-Semitic videos that I see. I got to meet a lot of amazing people, many people whom I used to look up to, and now I know them in person, so for me it's like a huge privilege. Everything I do with great love for the Jewish people and Am Yisrael, as well as great belief in coexistence and, like Anton said, human dignity. I truly believe we can somehow live here in peace. We just need to find a way together. And over the past, I think, 2 months, I started, getting involved with HaBayit. I want to thank Inon for giving me that privilege as well. And let's do some great things together.
Hi, I'm Malkah Fleisher. It's such a great honor for me to be on the stage with these illustrious gentlemen and lady. These are really some people who live, breathe, eat, and sleep the good of the Jewish people and of the region on a daily, hourly, minutely basis, daytime, nighttime. So some of them I agree with on some things, some of them I super duper don't. But I really have a tremendous respect for everyone sitting here, and including in the audience. I know that there's some really special people out there. I'm not sure what to say about myself overly, except that I'm a mom in Judea. I have 3 kids. I've had the merit to live all through our biblical land, basically. I lived in Beit El, then we lived in Jerusalem right across from HaBayit. And now we live in Judea. My husband is the spokesperson for the Jewish community of Hebron. And to me, like, I have like a little bit of tsmarmoret right now, like a little bit of like pricklies, because when I look out to you and I see what I see, which is I see that the Jewish people have returned to our ancient and ancestral homeland after 2,000 years, it like makes my skin jump. To me, I have a podcast with my husband, the Yehuda Fleisher Show. I do Jewish activism, Israel activism online. I run a couple of Facebook groups and my own Twitter account, which is starting to fire up. And my obsession is Jewish rights and Jewish life in the land of Israel. Happily living in an Arab Middle East, but feeling strong and confident here in our region. And I look forward to talking about that tonight.
Hi, my name's Yuda. Also live in Judea, father of 7 Bli Hanara, and I've been here almost 20 years. And my, adventure has, for the most part, been about figuring out what the next stage of Jewish liberation really is. I run an educational movement called the Brit Chazon, the Vision Movement. We have a magazine, visionmag.org. And the focus of our work is really trying to figure out what is the next stage of Jewish liberation after Zionism. Looking at Zionism as our material liberation, or what some of our sages would call Mashiach ben Yosef, like materially rebuilding the nation of Israel and its land. But what comes after that? As far as I'm concerned, Zionism ended in 1967, and since then we've been waiting for something new. We've been ready for something new, and until we actually formulate what that means, what that is, what that looks like, we're going to be stuck in a situation that Zionism as an ideological paradigm does not have answers for. So we need to really empower the next generation, and that's what we focus on, empowering the next generation to see themselves as thought leaders in a Jewish liberation movement that can protect Zionism's positive achievements while at the same time cleaning up its mess. And understanding that even though it was this incredible revolutionary movement that helped us to attain material liberation, it really caused a lot of harm to another people that we've been in conflict now with for about 101 years. I would say the conflict began in 1920, really simply to serve British colonial interests at the time, but since then our conflict has served many other interests. And some of the conclusions we've come to have brought me to this panel. One of the conclusions is but deeply, decolonizing Jewish identity. I know that slogan gets thrown around a lot, but it means something, and it means something that we really need to unpack and understand through the lens of real post-colonial tools and apply them to ourselves with the understanding we came back to this country miraculously, but with a lot of trauma that stands in our way and that creates a lot of problems and challenges that we should really have figured out how to get past by now. I'd say another conclusion that I've personally reached is we need to get free of the United States, we need to be independent of the US, and we need to do it fast before the empire collapses, because we don't want to be attached to it when it does. And the third, which is I think more the focus of our talk tonight, is reconciliation with the Palestinians. And my approach to that is really based on the understanding that for the last 101 years we've been living in 2 completely different realities. We've been living in 2 completely different movies, 2 completely different conflicts. We don't even agree on what the conflict is about, and when we fight each other, we don't even fight each other, we fight our fantasy antagonists of the other, and employ methods of struggle that don't even work, because we're not really fighting the other as the other experiences himself. So for me, this is really about trying to work towards a reality in this country. As Zinon said, Jewish sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, over the West Bank, I'd like to add, of course, Gaza and Sinai, but make sure that that's a reality in which all peoples are living with human dignity. Malka mentioned she cares a lot about Jewish rights, and which I'm sensitive to, but I'm more concerned with Jewish responsibility. And from my perspective, we have a responsibility to ensure justice in this entire country for all peoples. And the only way to do that, of course, is Jewish sovereignty, but then to behave justly and to behave like a people that belongs here and not like a bunch of European colonizers.
Thank you so much. I think I want to start by asking, so unfortunately this past Yom Yerushalayim, we kind of started into another war. Unfortunately, Hamas fired 6 rockets into Yerushalayim, and that started a barrage of over 4,000 over the next 2 weeks. I'm curious how this past, I don't know if you would call it a war, but if you would, has affected how you see the conflict. So why don't we start with Adiel?
Okay, so I remember that day not too long ago when we, along with other HaBayit members, went to the area of Sha'ar Shechem, Damascus Gate, and tried to initiate talks about peace, about the future with both Arabs and Jews on the street. And suddenly we were interrupted by this siren. I think the moment the siren went off, it was kind of like, I don't know how to say it in English, like Simona Fal. Like I felt like this kind of glass breaks inside my head. I was like, wow, okay, we're entering something. It interrupts our peace talks right now. Let's see where it goes. And it really, like I thought, went to this all-out war. And not only in Gaza, but also like on the streets. It was something that I think wasn't like any other operation we had in Gaza. Because suddenly I felt like it kind of like shook the entire Israeli society, and I see it on my friends, I see it, among my family. People ask me, how do you still believe that we can achieve something after what we just saw, the past 2 weeks? And it's like, it's a pickle. I asked myself this question, trying to find an answer. I'm not sure I found the answer yet. I can't say that it didn't change some perspectives, about how we as Israeli Jews come together with Israeli Arabs and our relations and all that. And I think, how do I say it? A moment that kind of like reassured me that it's still possible is actually happened yesterday. I went out of work back home, and on the way I bumped into an Arab friend of mine from Nazareth, and he identifies as a Palestinian. He's very proudly Palestinian. I saw everything he posted on social media over the past few weeks, and we've been talking. We're like in good terms, but I called him up for several posts that he shared and all that. And suddenly, when I bumped into him, I was like, okay, let's sit, let's talk, let's unpack everything that happened here. And suddenly, when I talked to him face to face, not on social media, not through all those like news headlines and all that, I saw sincerity. How do I say it? Sincerity in his eyes, and suddenly he talked like Dugri, and that's when I realized, even though like things are bad now, we still need to come together, face to face, talk things out, and that's the only way we can actually reach a real dialogue, not through social media, face to face.
Thank you so much. Can you pass the mic to Anton?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, I've actually got my own. Well, it's a big question because it's been a very difficult month, to say the least. But I think it's important to start by saying that many people who are either on the ground or have a clear set of eyes saw the escalation coming. We smelled this conflict in the air. It started, maybe we can even point it to social media with the TikTok attacks coming from gangs of East Jerusalem, Arab young men on the Haredim that was being filmed on TikTok, that was totally mismanaged by the police. It continued into the closure of the Damascus Gate that was totally unnecessary and mismanaged, and then turned into a political manipulation and allowing the March of Lahava, the Jewish supremacist organization, towards the Damascus Gate. More provocations flowed through the veins of Sheikh Jarrah, the neighborhood that's been scheduled to be evacuated and is not in national interest, in the interest of private bodies. And it got totally out of control. And it got out of control to an extent that so many of this country got hurt. Over the last month I've encountered so much pain. So many people who've been hurt psychologically and physically. And I can only look at the political establishment and say, where were you? This void of leadership, or this political manipulation that drew us into an unnecessary conflict. And we're so busy arguing about the media narratives, like which newspaper published what, and we're not really dealing with the innate holiness of human life and the fact that children have been killed. Okay? And so I know that there aren't any Arabs involved in the story tonight, but I work within a Jewish Arab organization. And I do want to just share a couple of voices of my Arab colleagues of the kind of things that they've experienced over the last month within Israel. Because not only did we have the conflict with Gaza, we had war on our streets, which has been totally misrepresented in the media, turned into some kind of game, whether it's symmetrical or not. And no one's really focusing on innocent people and what happened to them. No one cares about them in this. It's either a media game, or it's a minute video on some social media channel, or it's rating, or it's a political manipulation. I have a good friend. She lives in Ramla. She's a Christian Arab, middle-class family. She's very nice. She's an administrative assistant, and I'm very close with her. And for over a week, she didn't leave her house because she was so upset, so scared. She wouldn't let her children go into the kitchen because there's a window on the street, and so many windows have been smashed of the Arab houses. And her house had been marked by Hilltop Youth, who came and sprayed the Arab houses and marked which one was which. And I spoke to her, and she was in a state of trauma and a state of real pain. Same thing with my friend who lives in Lod, who saw the shooting on the first night. The young Arab man who in the middle of a protest, things got out of control, and one of the members of the Galim Torah pulled a gun and killed him on the street. Now you can argue about the narrative, but that young man is dead, and the people I know saw that happen in front of them. And this is a tremendous amount of pain to carry out of this. We're coming out of this in trauma, and yet we have not learned one lesson because it seemed as normal within the political sphere, this round of conflict. There's going to be another one. The army are marking up the victories that happened during the campaign. And I asked myself, is this really the reality that we're going to accept? Because I'm not. And I think there's other people who also are not going to accept this as a reality, because it doesn't have to be. And you can talk about Jewish liberation and coming back to the land after 2,000 years, and that's very nice and poetic and highfalutin. But I'm more interested in people's lives on a day-to-day basis, and the people that I have seen hurt and injured over the last month.
So I'd like to kind of bounce off of what you were saying. I think you brought up some very interesting points. I'm curious what we think when we're talking about the IDF's military targets in Gaza. We're talking about an army who is trying to defend itself from these rockets that are raining down on Israeli civilians, unfortunately, and on Gazan citizens, because about a third do fall in Gaza. So I'm curious, we'll start here, what we think the IDF might be able to do differently to minimize casualties. Are we doing everything in our power to minimize casualties? And at what point do we believe that we on the Jewish side are doing what we're doing, and perhaps maybe the change has to come from Palestinians and then really going against their corrupt leadership? So we'll start.
First of all, I'd say for two reasons. I need to focus on what we can do differently, not on what Palestinians can do differently. First of all, because Palestinians aren't here tonight, we are. So if we're going to talk about what can change, we have to speak about what we're going to change. And second, because the power dynamics do favor us disproportionately. And I mean, I don't think most Israelis understand anything about power dynamics, and that's okay. I understand that after many, many, many centuries without power, having it for the first time in 2,000 years is complicated. And we're not really sure what to do with it or how to use it or when appropriate. But we're not going to give it up. I think that's for sure. I think most people, most Jews in this country believe that if we didn't have control, if we didn't have the military advantage, we'd be living in a situation similar to the 1920s. And I don't think most people want that. Now, in terms of what you said, Gaza and the rockets and our Air Force, my frustration is really that I don't think we can avoid, and again, that's a different conflict from what's been going on in Lod and Bat Yam and other places. I want to separate those and maybe even make Sheikh Jarrah a third thing, because even though all of these things seem to have exploded at the same time, I think that we need to look at a few different things taking place beneath the surface. When it comes to Gaza and this ridiculous war we seem to keep having every 3-4 years, I don't think there's any solution other than acknowledging that we made a terrible mistake by letting George W. Bush force us out of Gaza. We have to return. We have to dismantle Hamas one way or another. We have to rebuild the Jewish communities that were destroyed, and we have to offer the Palestinians who live there better lives with us as equal citizens. And I would even, we can go into more details if anybody's interested. In terms of, and until we do that, until we actually return to Gaza, I think we're going to keep having this war. And remind me your name again? Anton. As Anton mentioned, we're talking about real human beings. When we see videos of buildings collapsing, there are people in that building, there are families in that building. This is real. And we can point fingers and blame the other, but in the end of the day, we have power to stop it. In terms of what's been going on in other places, I think I disagree with trying to pin it all on the Hilltop Youth and the Garin Torani. I think that the actual Jewish community in Lod expressed that it really, like most of the country, Israeli is not some civic national identity, right? We're not Canadians. Like, I think most people here, when they say Israeli, they mean B'nai Israel. And I think that if we're going to live here together, we have to be honest about that. For years, all of the Hasbara organizations and our foreign ministry have been trying to talk about Israeli identity as if it's this liberal, multicultural Western society. That's not where we live. And if we're honest about who we are, maybe we can find a relationship dynamic with the other that works, where we can actually respect each other and live together and not play games. In terms of Sheikh Jarrah, I think that part of the problem, the real problem, and I'll say this as somebody who's spent the last 20 years trying to create new Jewish communities on different mountaintops in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem. Malka and I actually overlapped a lot in some of the different places we've lived. I think that part of that game, part of that effort to just create all these Jewish communities in places where concern will be taken from us really stem from a concern that these places will be taken from us. As long as we're functioning inside of a two-state paradigm, we're going to keep fighting for these places. But if we can acknowledge as a society, as a state, as a people, and Palestinians, I think, are actually way more advanced than us on this front, that the two-state thing isn't happening, and that paradigm isn't going to happen, the land is not going to be partitioned, then we don't have to fight, to create a Jewish community in every neighborhood in Jerusalem that we're afraid is going to be taken from us. We don't have to fight this way to defend her or to defend our land. And part of the problem is right now property rights, like everything else in this country, have been politicized, have been weaponized as part of this conflict. The moment we all acknowledge Jerusalem is not going to be divided, the land is not going to be divided, this is going to be one country, one state, we're going to live here together, we can actually relate to each other as human beings and see the people living in Sheikh Jarrah as people who are being evicted from their homes, regardless of who, what. I know Jews were there before 1948 and were expelled. I understand the complications of Sheikh Jarrah, but at the same time, we do have to relate to people in the present as humans.
I just want to say that I think it's very interesting that the last two questions were really, what struck me about them is the framing. One was framed about the rockets on Jerusalem, and one was framed about how are we not doing enough? That's yours, this is my one. Are we doing enough to save lives? And I want to say that I dig what Yehuda is saying about Jewish responsibility. I really do. And it's true with a capital T. However, I will say that the Jewish people here in the land of Israel are still very much in a position where they are fighting like the most existential fight, not just on the ground, but also very much today in the idea of framing. For example, when I talked about coming back after 2,000 years, I see that as like a profound good, the progress of history, and something that's necessary for our people. But then there are other people that we deal with who are like ready to say that that's, I think the words were poetic and highfalutin, I believe are the words that you used, which is so like dismissive and dehumanizing. So we have this like stream of people who talk about, like speaking about poetic, talking about like the value of human life, and then kind of passive-aggressively suggest that the life of the Jewish state is not particularly important, it's kind of poetic and highfalutin, then I know that we're not really in a position yet where we can talk about the luxury items. On the Maslow's hierarchy, we're still at the bottom. We're not at the top of the Maslow's hierarchy yet. And so, to me, I come from a different place. Yehuda in his head has already seen a few steps ahead, which I respect and which we absolutely need to do. We can't just be like a bunch of like grisly IDF guys with like Uzis all day long. Like we have to be thinking about what is the next thing. However, like we a little bit have to be IDF guys with Uzis, because not only are we dealing with a very existential threat, the Hamas question that you asked at the beginning, the firing of rockets, I knew when those rockets were fired, you're talking about going back to that day, I knew that when those rockets were fired, those were going to become the focus of like the next phase of talking about what's happening in this war, because we're so much more comfortable talking about that. Because we're like used to getting shot at from Hamas, and whoa, it's Jerusalem this time, so that's like a red line or whatever, as if Tel Aviv is not a red line, which I find to be kind of offensive. Because God bless my brothers and sisters in Tel Aviv and anywhere in the land of Israel. But I knew that everything that was going on HaBayit, and everything that was going on in Shimon HaTzadik, and everything that was going on in Lod, and Ramla, and Akko, and like, I don't know how many of you watched like nightly news during the war. It was a big fight with my husband. I am religious, and it was a big fight with my husband whether we should have like TV in our house. I don't know, Hamaven Yavin, I guess. But like, my husband was like, we will have like Israeli news in our house. So we were watching Israeli news at night, and you see these people from Lod, these like most regular of the regular people. And they're just like, we've been living next to these people for 20 years, and then today they came to our window and were like, we're gonna slaughter you in your sleep. And then we're just like, this is a coexistence city. What does this even mean? And so, like, I have to go back to the first question. I'm sorry if that's, like, illegal or whatever, but I'm a mitnachel, and sometimes we do things we're not supposed to do. I have to go back to the first question and say, like, how did I react when all this went down? I was just like, I was just like, yeah. And, like, while I have personal experiences with Arabs who I know are not part of the war against Israel, the reality is that there are, and we have to generalize in order to really talk about anything. So I have to generalize and say there's really two groups of people. You have the people who want their personal rights, and they just want to live nicely, and they like it here, and they feel like they have a connection. And then you have people who want national rights. They want some kind of state here. They want to undo the Nakba, right? Which happened in not 1967, which happened in 1948. They want to undo that. And those, like, are not down for that. And I know a lot of Israelis are not down for that. And I think that this latest conflict really triggered us remembering that. And it's by far not just in the mitnachel community, but also throughout Israel. And I don't like use TikTok. I'm just an admirer of some of our like fabulous TikTok people here. But I watch TikTok videos, and it's like Israelis are pissed. Israelis are pissed by what happened, and they feel betrayed. And that is something that we have to talk about way before we talk about the nuances of IDF actions, in my opinion.
I just really quickly want to address the elephant in the room that's been brought up a couple times, that Palestinians are not here with us, Arabs are not here with us. It is a very difficult time to reach out because there is a lot of pressure on those corrupt government systems that they should not coexist with us. And really quickly, because I want to get to audience questions.
Just to say that's not true. I was just at work today with Palestinians, and like we have meetings with Palestinians. It's not because there's some kind of corrupt system.
I meant publicly.
Yeah, publicly as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Bring your Palestinians next time. Bring yours. They didn't.
I don't generalize. I don't think it's helpful. I know you do. And also, they're not my Palestinians. I think that Yuda's got some notes on post-colonialism. I don't really know the field, but you don't say that, right? My Palestinians.
I think she meant to bring
your friends.
Palestinian friends next time.
Obviously, here at HaBayit, we are not opposed to hearing Palestinian voices. We want to hear their voices, and we want to coexist with them. I'm curious that with recent pressures that do exist from their leadership, how we can move forward in building those bridges. And just quickly, in 2 minutes, each of you, and I'm going to stop you when it's 2 minutes, what you think we can do to kind of bridge this gap that we're currently feeling in the aftermath of this conflict.
Like I said before, I think we're living in two completely different realities. And one of the things that really struck me, I think, the hardest during the last couple weeks was the principled resistance on both sides, or the deepening of the principled resistance on both sides to even understand the identity, narrative, thoughts, feelings of the other. I don't see any way to transcend, I don't see any way to move past this conflict without actually trying to understand the other as the other understands himself. Otherwise, we're just going to keep fighting on loop against our fantasy antagonists and doing things to try to hurt each other and not realizing why it doesn't work, because we're also casting each other as very different antagonists than how the other experiences himself. I think that the real, and again, the power dynamics favor us. I think we should be the first to make the moves towards building trust, but it really requires us to be able to courageously engage the narrative, the identity, the grievances and aspirations of the other as they actually exist. Try to understand what we've been contributing to this conflict for the last 101 years instead of blaming the other, and try to share our story as well, because the same problems exist in reverse. I mean, they also have a refusal to understand who we are. And I think that ultimately, for me, the goal is really to create a bigger narrative and when I say narrative, I just want to be very clear. I define a narrative as a collection of facts that are selectively chosen organized and contextualized within a very specific worldview in order to tell a specific story. I think for the last century, both of us have been taking the facts that we want, that support the story we're trying to tell, and omitting the facts that complicate the story we're trying to tell. I want to create a bigger story that's inclusive enough to encompass both ostensibly rival narratives in which we can both be co-protagonists together. I don't think it's hard. I've dedicated the last 12 years of my life to trying to do this. I find that it's actually a lot easier than most people would think, but we need the courage to just do it and not be afraid of the story of the other.
Can you repeat the question?
How do you think that we can reach out to Palestinians? What can we be doing to bridge this gap that we're currently feeling in the aftermath?
So one of the things that I think is that I think that the mitnachalim, the people living in Judea and Samaria, are really the best suited to do this. I think that we live on the day-to-day, we share stores, we share roads, and I think that there are a lot of relationships that are already being built. So in that sense, everyone should feel very encouraged. I think that at the same time, if we're going to talk about colonialism, so then we have to also be able to distance ourselves, in a sense, from their internal issues. Meaning to say, if they're, everyone here can recognize that there is an oppression problem. There is a debate as to who is causing the oppression. But everyone can agree that there is an oppression problem, and the question is what to do about it. If you ask me, there is a major internal discussion that has to happen. I think that sometimes we are scapegoated so that they don't have to deal with their internal problem. And so, in a sense, what I think that we have to do is keep doing what we do. I think we have to live our life. I think we have to build our country. I think that always we have to try to be the best, most moral people that we can be on the individual level, on the national level. Who could disagree with that? But at the same time, this is a little bit their, if you want to call them a nation, so then say that this is their national growth process. They have to come to some terms where we're not they're not our children, they're people who live next to us, and they have to figure this out for themselves.
So I have to agree with Malka here that obviously I'm not going to disregard that there are problems within the Arab-Palestinian society. But I'm talking from an Israeli perspective, an Israeli Jewish perspective, and I can't fix all those problems. What I can do is engage in conversations, give my perspective as an Israeli, and I think the most important thing to do when we engage in those conversations with Palestinians and Arabs is that we shouldn't be afraid asking difficult questions. We shouldn't be afraid telling our real perspective, telling what we actually believe. For example, yesterday when I talked to this Arab friend, I told him, listen, you know me, I'm a Zionist, I'm Jewish, I see Israel as a Jewish state, and this is the way I want it to stay, but I also believe in democracy, and I believe in dignity, and I believe in rights for your people. I believe we should find a way to coexist. And once we stop apologizing for our beliefs, once we stop trying to sugarcoat those difficult questions, we can have a more meaningful discourse. We can actually talk Dugri. And I believe that when we feel comfortable talking like that, confidently about our perspective, they will feel confident to talk about their perspective as well in a respectful manner. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
So look, I think this firstly relates to your previous question of doing a scorecard for the IDF in the last round of conflict, which I think we have to understand that the IDF is an army, and so therefore when you are a hammer, you hit nails. An army is used for war and for defense. It's not used for negotiations and shouldn't be used for running people's day-to-day lives as well as it is in the territories today as well, because that's an army. An army deals with war and military. And so if we're looking at the last round of conflict, it seems that the military is the only really solution or policy card that's legitimately on the table, which I really think we should be questioning deeply. after coming out of a month of trauma and hopefully not going into another one. And I think if we're talking about how we're going to in some way extricate ourselves from what is an intractable conflict, as in we're currently in a status quo that's intractable and something needs to change. And the things that needs to change is public opinion on both sides, and it's the most worrying factor for me really in the last round of conflict has been, and it's been unprecedented, it's been the level of Jewish extremism, the way that Jewish extremism has been mainstreamed in Israeli society, because I really think that is pulling us away from finding a solution. And that's why, yes, I do take issue with the way that you say you come back after 2,000 years. I'm a religious Jew. I believe deeply in Jewish values within the state. Not in the way that you're suggesting here, because really to come back after 2,000 years, having Jewish sovereignty, everyone can be welcome, it can be a one state, but with Jewish sovereignty. Well, there's a reason you can't get Palestinians around this table, because you can't offer people and say to them, okay, you can have equal rights under Jewish sovereignty. This is Jewish land. Just accept that. And also there'll be less rights in other things as well. And as we go on, there might be some other stuff as well, but just accept that. Because they're not going to accept that, because I certainly wouldn't accept that as a Jew either in this land. And I think that there needs to be some deep listening, because maybe you've been speaking to some Palestinians who are representative maybe of Palestinian political society and academic society, because there's a very large Palestinian liberation movement, and the view of joining some kind of one state run by Jewish sovereignty, that just doesn't exist within the Palestinian discourse. And when you say that settlers in some way can create good relations, and there's moments of like good interaction, well, I'm not sure if that's the case in Hebron where you live.
There's tons of great relationships in Hebron. I could give you story after story.
I'm gonna break us here because I want to get the audience to get up and ask questions. Is there a microphone?
There's a few.
Yeah, just if you guys want to, you can line up right here and.
No.
So I have a question that is directed to you, which is basically many people try to say that the reason that the Palestinians go through their own struggles and what they describe as oppression is due to the fact that we try to apply Jewish Israeli sovereignty over them. So imagine if we actually lived in a place without the existence of the state of Israel, without Jewish independence at all. I'm pretty sure that most of the people around the world would really be against the idea of the existence of the Jewish state. So, can you just explain further how is Jews living under Arab rule, which is something that is really possible under if a two-state solution is being applied? How does Jews living under Arab rule and obviously not having equal rights and equal opportunities is good or justified, while Palestinians or Arab people who live under Israeli rule and do not have the same advantages that Jewish people have, how is that not justified?
Okay, so I mean, you seem to be presenting it like a zero-sum game, as if it's either this or this, and in both cases, like them winning means us losing, or us winning means them losing. And that's quite simply not the case. So there's no need to worry about that. I mean, the state of Israel, with an ensured Jewish majority that helps create a Palestinian state in terms of peace and neighborliness, and that's a Palestinian state, and this is a Jewish democratic state. We're much safer in that way. That's definitely a much healthier place to be in, because that's the end of the conflict. Because when you're in conflict, as what we've just seen now, this has been a peak of violence, right? And so, therefore, you go into a peace process when you have conflict. That's how it works. And after you've done a peace process, you get to a state, hopefully, where the violence drops, or you find solutions where people are less oppressed and intimidated by each other, and you can create better relationships.
Can I ask something just going off of that? Sorry. If you believe that a two-state solution, I'm assuming you're pro two-state, if land for peace could work with the Palestinians, why hasn't it worked in the past when we offered almost the entire West Bank?
I don't know
And why didn't it work?
I don't know what land for
Gaza?
peace means, because the Palestinian people has been sitting on this piece of land for a long time, and it's not ours to give. It is there's equal legitimacy to the claims over a lot of places in the land. Well, we've got to
yes,
sort
but
out.
you're talking about a two-state solution,
That's right. So
which
I
I'm
don't see it as
assuming
land
would
for
be
peace, no.
somewhere divided by like the Green Line, something around that. We offered that. They said no.
You want to? I don't know what
I'm
you're
just
talking
curious
about.
how you think that a two-state solution is going to work when it's been offered by Israel and rejected by Palestinian leadership, Arab leadership.
Yeah.
Even going back to the Peel Commission, which was nothing of what the land we have now.
And it's hard to get stuck in the Peel Commission at the moment, but I come from a Jewish value. It says in the Torah, "Ohev shalom, rodef shalom." You've got to love peace and you've got to chase peace. And it's a very strong commandment to love peace and to chase peace. And the way that you do that is not by freezing peace talks for 20 years. We haven't been around a table. We're not making an effort to get back to the table. We're not thinking of policy solutions. We're only dealing with military might, and that's untenable. And as you'll see, it's going to infect the inside Israel as well. And Israel will end up paying the price of the occupation. Will be losing the whole society.
Sure.
So, I really connect to what Yuda said, because like religious Jews obviously would never agree to share divide any piece of our land, and this is something that really connects me to the Palestinian identity, because the Palestinian identity is simply Arab identity, and what motivates them in a political sense is PanArabism. So far, we know that PanArabism wasn't so friendly toward Jewish people, and the evidence and the nowadays it's like 3 million Jewish people that their ancestors were evicted, expelled from their home countries in the Arab countries. So if we know that PanArabism and like any type of like Arab state is inherently problematic towards Jewish people, how are you going to defend it? How are you going to defend like the creation of an Arab state on a Jewish homeland, like in the Jewish homeland?
Pan-Arabism is a generalization from the 1970s. What I do know, though, is that if we look at the internal conflict that we had in Israel, there was vast discrepancy between the different mixed cities. Lod, which is far from being a home of coexistence, I work in Lod the last 7 years, and it's very far from coexistence, and all of the Arab parties left the coalition a month before, and the mayor was saying that the crime in the town is Islamically based, and very bad relations in Lod. In Ramla, that's 5 minutes apart from Lod, you've got a mayor there called Michal Vidal, who's a Likudnik, very sensible guy, very responsible guy, brought Arabs into his coalition, toured the town together, tried to reduce the tensions. I didn't see people who are holding pan-Arabist ideologies. In fact, I was on the streets for some of the violence in Jerusalem and in other places as well. I didn't see anyone reading, Marx and Engels. These are people who are watching TikTok. And so it's about our actions. It's about that responsibility of leadership. It's this cliche of creating an Arab state and pan-Arabism. No, we can work out our problems locally if we treat each other with respect and dignity and start to listen to each other.
Thank you.
So my question is entirely different, and it's for anyone who would like to answer. I think maybe Adiel could connect to it the most. I don't know about the rest of you, but Yehuda mentioned the topic of Hasbara, and I've seen lately a situation where in Israel the Hasbara is not being done by politicians, by people who are supposed to be doing it. It's done by civilians, by citizens, by mostly youth, and a little bit of like public figures, like Noah Tishby, for example. So it feels like the government, like the people who are supposed to be handling that are not handling that, and it falls on citizens to work for that. And I would like to ask you, how did we get here? What is the Israeli Hasbara missing, and what can we do to change that and explain ourselves better, because right now it looks very bad for us in the world.
So let's start with Adiel, and then we're going to go to...
So I think there are two problems. One on the government level. I think that the government doesn't care nearly enough to how we look in the world. And I know it's like, why do we need to care about how we look in the world? But this is how things work nowadays. Everything is about like news, and it's like an info war. What I would like to see is for a government official, someone from the IDF, I don't know, coming every day to talk on TV, kind of like a spokesperson to explain what happened today in this day of the operation. Like after the bombing of the AP tower, it just happened, and I felt like Israel let the entire world take whatever they want from this bombing without even explaining what happened there. So we know that we have all the information about like Hamas being in this building. I understand some things might be confidential, but why not share the things that we can share to make people actually understand what was the reason behind the bombing of this press tower? That's one thing. And another problem, I think, is on the civil level. We as Israeli Jews, I feel like we don't know how to tell our story. We don't know our history from the indigenous liberation kind of side, and this is what works for people from the West, for example. For people of Western culture, liberation and rights and all those like social justice values are the values that matter. This is what makes us who we are in their image. And once we can't tell that, and we only focus on, oh look, we have gay rights and cherry tomatoes, which is amazing. I love cherry tomatoes, and gay rights is great. They don't care. They simply don't care. They don't know who we are. They don't know that we are an indigenous people that came from this land, was exiled from this land, and had the land colonized by different imperial powers for 2,000 years, and now we returned. And we're here to stay. We're here to stay, and we want to make a better future. And unfortunately, we can't tell that. And this is part of what I'm trying to do on my activism, trying to guide Israelis on how to teach and tell our story.
And just, we don't have so much time, so...
I'd love to answer also.
Yeah, we're gonna...
The Hasbara organizations are part of the problem. For years, they've been trying to present Israel as an outpost of Western civilization in the Semitic region, which only strengthens the claim that we're just like a settler colony in the Middle East. Even if they use the word indigenous now, they're still making Israel look like an outpost of Western civilization. And even if you look at the pro-Israel demonstrations that took place in the United States, they all have, Israeli flags and American flags. You ever see a Palestinian demonstration with American flags? No, of course not, right? And so in terms of what Adiel, right? In terms of what Adiel mentioned, it's not as simple as saying we're indigenous. Because the truth is, we're a people that was displaced from here thousands of years ago and came back using the tools of settler colonialism. You could look at the Zionist movement as an indigenous people's liberation movement, and from another angle, you can look at it as a colonial project. And both are partially true, because we're complicated. We're the only people I could think of we're the only example in history that I know of a people that was displaced from its land, actually maintained its identity for 2,000 years, and came back and achieved political independence in the land it was displaced from. But we used the tools that were available to us at the time, and those tools were colonial tools. And I think now, without getting into who was what and what did who, I think right now we need to focus on how we can move forward, and that means the aspects, the features of our coming home that hurt another people need to be addressed, and need to be addressed by us. Meaning the Jews in Judea are not the Americans in Afghanistan or the French in Algeria. The problem is we sometimes behave like we are. And that hurts people. And if we want to say we're indigenous, we should act like we're indigenous and stop acting like colonizers. And that means that's part of tshuva. That's part of returning to our real identity. In fact, I would actually say that Palestinians are very much victims of the Jewish identity crisis, us not having this post-colonial conversation, because I think everything, in my experience, everything that I think Palestinians feel deeply oppressed by here are expressions, are features of our identity crisis. And if we actually figure out who we are and what we're doing here, we'd be able to create systems and policies and a reality between the river and the sea that both people can feel happy in.
You know, our country is so great, but our government is not the best part of it. God bless them. They were very, very hyper involved with themselves at the time, and I think that that's why they didn't give such a fantastic response to what was going on, because they were worried about themselves. But I think it was kind of miraculous, and I'm sort of really glad that it happened. And that's because I saw the average Israeli rise up. I saw the average Israeli get triggered to remember that really, like, we talk about rights, and rights are important, okay? But like, that this is not a rights conflict. The bloodshed is not about who has the rights in the land of Israel. I promise you that while we're having a conversation about Palestinian rights, Palestinians are not having a conversation about Jewish rights.
They're living under us.
But we live in their region, and they're not talking in their region. They're not talking about our right to a state, for example. Everyone likes to narrow down on what's going on here locally, but I prefer to look at it in a more global perspective. The average person with their like little Facebook page and their little Instagram, remember that this is an ethnic religious conflict, and that this is not something that's going to be solved through giving this much land or this much land. And so your average Israeli, seeing that no one was standing up for his cause, stood up for his own cause. And I think that there was something profoundly healthy about that. Yeah, it didn't look so good in the New York Times, and it didn't, but I wouldn't say that our detractors grew in numbers. Like, our detractors are still our detractors, and our friends are still our friends for the most part. I think that it's going to be okay, and I think that I love to see that the average Israeli thinks to himself that it's his responsibility. Speaking of responsibility, taking responsibility, he found himself accountable for Israel, for the message of Israel, for the Jewish people, and I think that that's a good sign of healthy democracy in Israel.
Great. I want to thank you all for coming. Please stick around. We're going to take a little break. Oh, we're out of time. I'm sorry.
No. Actually, take another until 7:45.
Until 7:45. Okay. Never mind. Just kidding.
You got to get in line over here, I think.
Yeah, come. You're too polite.
Stand over there. You'll be out of the camera.
So I think my concern with all of this is that one thing that struck me was the Green Prince, and he talked a lot about how the governments of the Palestinian people don't actually represent the Palestinian people, and they use their religion as a basis for their terrorism and the things that they do. And I wanted to know how do you think we should deal with that, and if you think that's really what's happening, and how do you handle a situation where there's governments who don't actually represent the people, and
Dismantle.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that if you like. It's a major problem that the Palestinians haven't had elections in 15 years, and that their institutions are failing the people, and there's cronyism, so that only people who are connected to the establishment are taken care of, and there's hierarchies within Palestinian society between the more farmer-style falachim to the refugee camps, to the cities, and then within that as well. This is really not a good situation. It's a society that that I'm quite impressed that it manages to hold itself together as well as it does, actually, with the kind of institutions it has to deal with. But those institutions haven't really been helped by us or by the international community. During the Trump administration, I had a meeting with someone quite senior in the Trump administration, and I asked them what's their plan with the Palestinian Authority, with Abbas, and they said, we just want to, we want to find a way to destabilize Abbas so he goes, because he's not a partner. And I said, okay, you want to destabilize Abbas? I said, there could be chaos following that if that's not planned well. There could be, anarchy on the streets, and then I could see different, almost like warlord families cropping up out of this. And then who do we speak to? Like, democracy could totally fall to pieces. At the moment, we have a frozen, broken democracy within the Palestinian Authority, right? So why would you want to totally destabilize that? There could be blood on the streets. And he said, yeah, that could be the result of it, but that's what our policy is. That was under the Trump administration. I don't know if he was he was actually a career bureaucrat. I wanted to say he was like a real estate lawyer, but he wasn't. He was actually a bureaucrat. And I think that that's part of the problem, is that we've got a Palestinian people here who have had no space to create institutions or democratic kind of standards within their society. And definitely not under a state of occupation where the majority of the Palestinian people are facing, whether it's lack of freedom of movement or lack of access to their property or a ton of different situations that they've got to deal with Israeli sovereignty. And so where does that line drawn between the Palestinian Authority and Israeli rule? Is it within the towns of the cities of Area A? Well, sometimes the IDF comes in there. It's very unclear. And I think that this is a key challenge, that a peace process, a deep peace process, is about Palestinian institution building, hopefully in partnership with Israel, in a place where we can work together. Because once there's peace, that's not the end of our story. We've still got the choice of whether we want to be a broken region or we want to succeed together. And in my mind, that is the choice. It's either broken here or we're succeeding together.
I just want to say a few words. Very simple. I live in Bethel, and I want to say that since they gave the 6 cities or whatever it was to the Arabs, there was a period of intifada. They gave them rifles, 35,000 rifles, I believe, something like that. They trained, and we have over 2,000 people who have been killed in our area. Now, I'm not saying only might is the only thing that you are supposed to do, and that's the only solution. I'm not saying that, but at the same time I'm saying I'm Jewish, I live here, and I have a right to live. Now, anti-Semitic people in most of the world, they deny the right of Jewish people to exist, to begin with. That's the whole book, many literatures and so on. You can read up what is anti-Semitism. Therefore, all the places where the Jews have been in the past, from the enlightenment of Hungary, of Romania, Russia, Latvia, and Croatia, we tried to integrate ourselves. It did not work out, and they were anti-Semitic, and they killed many Jews. So the question to me is, to give dignity to the Palestinians, certainly. To give right, certainly. I go to the Kupat Cholim, they tell me they give to the Arabs the Mekori, this medicine. One is a Machlif, one it is the Mekori thing, and they give it to the Arab side. Or the Hadass and the Sharet Tzedek, full of Arabs, and the universities, which they are using, and they can vote as well. So on one side, there is a lack of recognition to say, colonialism, terrible, the Jews, they are exploiting. But I don't hear what are the Jews doing right. And for the only place we're doing right, we're helping many Arabs, thousands of Arabs, to have some kind of jobs and so on, more than in the Lebanon, which it was destroyed. So I think simply to say, give them land, give them arms, I don't think is the proper way to do things. Now, certainly we have to improve our police, the army, etc., all kinds of things to improve. But at the same time, we need to recognize that we are here because we have the right to be here as Jewish people to exist in the whole world. Thank you.
Hi. So I kind of have two questions, so I'm going to combine them into one. So first, I want to say, I personally also very much so believe in grassroots processes from the bottom up. I think there's a lot of power when we're able to come together and unite those processes. Especially when we look at the Lerach pyramid and we look at all of them kind of have to happen simultaneously. One of the things that I think is a problem with NGOs and grassroots processes, though, is that each one is kind of working separately, and there's not really a unification together. And so I think there's often a lack of outreach or lack of really ability to transform mindsets. So I'm going to combine that with the second question, which is I think at the political level, also political leaders in the US and even the parties in the Israeli government, that everybody is really stuck right now only looking at the two-state solution and not really being willing to consider other possibilities. And I think the only place that really there's a siach, like a talking about potential possibilities that aren't just two-state solution is at the grassroots level. So I'm curious how each of you see the opportunity of being able to move that discussion from other possibilities from the grassroots to the more top-down processes.
I think the challenge with I think you're right, that the two-state solution didn't work, hasn't worked, won't work, and in my opinion shouldn't work because it's unjust. It's unjust to us and it's unjust to them. And I think the only solution that can work is one where we both feel like winners in a one-state reality. In order to make that viable, in order to make that conversation happen, I think we have to really point to what that can look like. For me, I think right now, for example, Israel today is a European-style nation state with superficial Jewish decorations. Those decorations are too Jewish for the Palestinians, too othering for the Palestinians, and not Jewish enough for Haredim. And Haredim are important too, because like Palestinians, Haredim are one of the fastest growing populations between the river and the sea. I would suggest moving towards, and maybe this is part of a post-colonial process, actually asking ourselves, what does it mean to have a Jewish state? What makes a state Jewish? Just like we should ask what makes a state democratic. I think the Jewish character of a state needs to become a lot deeper than it is right now, so that every Haredi child recognizes the Jewishness and his values being expressed in the policies and institutions of the state, but also much softer than it is right now. Meaning instead of a shallow, hard Jewish identity, our state should have a soft, deep Jewish identity. And for Palestinians, it should just be like a state where we're fully included and fully equal and having a great time. And even for Jews with like barely any Jewish education, it should be barely noticeable, the Jewishness. But for those of us who care and want a Jewish state, we should be experiencing that very, very deeply in the entire land. And that means that the actual, not the skin of the state, but the actual skeleton and the organs of the state, the values and the identity expressed, should be deeply Jewish.
I think you touched on such an important concept, and I think it's also bigger than I think it's a very big concept because it really touches on like what is the lingua franca of values and rights in the world today. And the world has really become so global. And I think that when you even just dare to say something like, think about something aside from a two-state solution, what you're really saying is we should dare to imagine something aside from the like European and Western imposed concepts of what
Balkanization.
What diplomacy is, what statehood is, what rights structures are, what what populations living together looks like. I think that Israel, we had a question here about Hasbara. One of the reasons that this is a question at all is because there is such a heavy, oppressive Euro-Western American presence in our business and in our conversation, and it's like we cannot have the conversation. We can't even have it at all because we have the European money and we have the American money all intermeshed and everything. We have different allegiances and alliances all using the stage of the United Nations to impose things in our region, impose things in our state. There's now a permanent committee to investigate Israel at the United Nations, and this is all very, very Euro. And there's all these global interests that have involved themselves in our stuff, and they have their tentacles in our land. And while I may disagree with some of my colleagues here about what the end vision is, I think that many of us would agree that one of the most important steps is elbowing out some of the noise and some of the people from the outside, real outsiders, real colonialists, who are trying to force their values on us, force their ideas on us, force their policy perspectives on us. And when we start to kick that out, then we'll be able to have more clear thinking on both sides and also between us.
Okay, so...
Well, let me just take a quick answer, thank you. I think that, first of all, don't be depressed about NGOs and people coming together. My organization, Oz V'Shalom, we joined kind of a solidarity vigil of Women Wage Peace. There was over 35 other NGOs coming together for that. The peace camp in Israel is growing. There's and the kind of the peer partnership between the movements is growing as well. We're working together strongly on it. At the same time, we shouldn't confuse grassroots and policy change. Okay, grassroots might lead to policy change, but it doesn't mean that the conversation about what the policy should look like happens on a grassroots level. Because then what you have is a couple of taxi drivers, a guy who works in something else, sitting down and saying, well, what's the solution to this? Maybe we can draw out something. No, that's not how grassroots works. That solution's not going to be adopted. I work in an organization, we've had a lot of our programs adopted into policy, and always, no matter how good the program, the policy is always a little bit different. Okay, because there's a difference when it gets to the policy table. But what there needs to be from the grassroots is a push in that direction. It needs to build the public swell and in some way incentivize peace process, because at the moment the peace process has been disincentivized. No one's spoken about a two-state solution on the policy level for the last 20 years, really. Within the peace community, there's a lot of different ideas. I mean, Homeland for All, which is a major peace organization, talks about a different model, and there's federated models, and there's all kinds of things. I don't think that they're ultimately going to be the models that are going to be adopted, but they are creating a groundswell of people saying we need to find a solution to it. And so I'd really appeal to people in the audience and say, for grassroots activism, join the groundswell. Get involved in an organization. You won't believe the difference you can make with 5 very committed people. It doesn't have to be a ton. And there's a lot of partners and peers to find. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are out of time now. I want to thank you all for coming. Please stick around. We're taking a little break. There are some refreshments over there. There will be the Hebrew panel after this. And I also want to give a big thank you to all our panelists and to Inon and HaBayit and everyone who helped make this happen. So thank you.